Hello all, welcome to the live session of Narayana IAS Academy. The topic that we've picked up today is putting manufacturing on track, and this particular article has been taken from page number 11 of the Indian Express. So this particular article basically discusses about why has there been a consistent or a persistent stagnation of the manufacturing sector in India's economy. What are the reasons and what better can actually be done with respect to this regard. It speaks about various policy interventions that has been brought by the government, like the Make in India initiative, the production linked incentive scheme, etc., in order to give betterment or enhance or to effectively boost the manufacturing sector in order to contribute to the Indian economy. But however, the manufacturing sector has been stagnant because it is actually facing a number of challenges. One is with respect to that of the industrial investments. The second is with respect to that of boosting the manufacturing output. And the next one is with respect to other, regulatory as well as, the policy challenges it actually faces. So here in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the manufacturing sector as well as it is a part of the industrial growth, and we can actually map this particular topic to mains, that is GS paper 3, changes in the industrial policy and their effects on industrial growth. Okay. So now if we actually look at the previous year question, there was a question asked in the 2017 mains examination with respect to that of failure of the manufacturing sector in achieving the goal of the labor intensive exports. So similarly, all the three sectors of the economy, that is the primary, secondary and the tertiary, that is agriculture, manufacturing and services, becomes very, very important for both your prelims as well as the mains examination. Now moving forward, let us understand what this particular article is talking about. Okay, so the article actually discusses the current stagnation and the challenges in the Indian manufacturing sector, while towards the end the author is actually suggesting certain targeted policy recommendations for reviving or revitalizing the manufacturing sector. So moving forward, let us understand what is the manufacturing sector first of all. So the manufacturing sector is a sector that basically involves the transformation of the raw materials or components into finished products, that is actually fit for the final consumption using tools, human labor, machinery as well as chemical processing. And this is actually a segment of the secondary sector. So manufacturing falls basically under the secondary sector. So here we'll be discussing about what is the primary, secondary and the tertiary. So key industries that actually fall within the manufacturing sector include the production of aircraft, the automobiles, the chemicals, clothing, computers, consumer electronics, electrical equipments, furniture, heavy machinery, refined petroleum products, ships as well as steel, among others. Okay. So moving forward, let us understand what is basically the different sectors of the economy or the basis of classification. Okay. So economy can be classified into primary sector. This is the primary sector. This is the secondary sector. And this is the tertiary sector. So what do you mean by primary sector? The sector which basically harnesses the natural resources, be it land or it can be water, it can be soil, etc. And here examples actually include agriculture. And next one, you can also cite mining and quarrying as examples. You can think mining and quarrying will come under industries, but no, mining actually involves the harnessing of the mineral resources, right? So it is a natural resources, so that actually falls under the primary sector. The second one is the secondary sector, which is nothing but it turns the raw materials into final consumable products or goods. So this is where we have our manufacturing sector. We also have sectors like chemical engineering. Then we have electric utilities. So all these come under the secondary sector. So even this time you actually had a question like which of the following are the primary activities and secondary activities. It was given as match the following pairs in your prelims examination 2024. So we need to be very clear on what falls under each of these criteria. Okay, so the tertiary sector basically actually encompasses the services sector. What are the services sector? It actually involves hotels, businesses, etc. And then it has the IT, it has the theatre, which is basically nothing but your entertainment. So this is the basic classification of the sectors under an economy, and manufacturing that we are discussing about is actually a subsector of the secondary sector. Okay. So moving forward, let us understand what is the current status of stagnation or the current status of the manufacturing sector that we already discussed. It is facing a lot of stagnation. Why and what are the reasons, and what better can actually be done in order for its effective revitalization. This is what we are discussing about. So current stagnation, if you see, there is a declining GDP share. We have every sector contributing to the GDP, right? What is GDP? GDP is nothing but the total value of the goods and services that is produced within your territory in a particular year. So here if you see, the manufacturing sector's share to the GDP was actually 16.1% at current prices in 2014-15, and after a decade, you see in the 2023-24 times, what happens, it has actually fallen by 3 percentage points. Okay, so by 2022-23, this share actually fell by 3 percentage points, and this stagnation reflects the sector's inability to grow in proportion to that of the overall economy. On one side, there is economic expansion, but on the other side, the contribution of the manufacturing sector to the overall GDP has actually decreased. Then if you see Make in India initiative, this is one of the flagship programs of the government, which was launched in the year 2014, and that actually aimed to raise the manufacturing sector's contribution from 16% to 25%, and also to create around 100 million jobs by the year 2022. But despite all these ambitious targets, the initiative actually struggled to achieve its objectives partially, and also you can say wholly, by regulatory challenges. There were a lot of regulatory challenges because there were changing of the FDI norms. There's a lot of red tapeism for anybody to come and start over a business and to invest in a particular business, and because of this actually did not take proper shape. The next one is ease of doing business index. If you see, India's rank was actually significant because in the World Bank's ease of doing business, the rank actually improved from 142nd rank in the year 2014-15 to just 63 in 2019-2020. But despite the improvement, if you see, there was no proper industrial investment that was actually taking place, and the output growth was actually not significant. So here it actually indicates that this EDBI improvement did not translate into real economic benefits. The next one is regulatory reforms. There were a number of regulatory reforms that was actually done in order to reduce the regulatory burden on the government, but then ultimately this actually fell in favor of the employers. Like, let us actually see. Reforms aimed at reducing the regulatory burden often benefited the employers more than the intended industrial sectors. For example, what happened is the mandatory annual certification of industrial boilers. Industrial boiler structures are there, right, in the industries. It is actually mandatory for them to be certified after the quality check and the proper functioning by the state regulations. Okay, but what happened, in order to reform it, or to in order to reduce the regulatory burden on the state, what happened, there was a voluntary third party certification that was actually given, but that eventually led to the breach as well as zero compliance for in case of Maharashtra by 2023. So these changes replaced the state mandated regulations with self certification, and this did not effectively improve the industrial safety or the productivity of the manufacturing sector. Next, moving on, industrial growth and imports. Imports. This is very interesting. Okay, so the industrial growth rate measured as gross value added at constant prices was a mere 3% annually from 2014 to 2022 compared to the GDP growth rate, that is 6 to 7%. This is nothing but, in simpler terms, there was economic expansion. So how do you measure the economic expansion? In terms of GDP, right? GDP is nothing but the total goods as well as the services which is actually produced inside your territory in a particular year, right, in your country. So this GDP was actually expanding, and this was around 6 to 7%. So when there's expansion in the economy, ultimately this leads to increased production because there was increased demand. But then what happened to increase this particular production? Our import dependence, that is import of the raw materials in order to produce a goods, was actually more. So India significantly depended a lot on other countries like China. So that is what you are saying here. So for example, it led to the increased net imports, particularly from nations like China, and in 2021-22 imports from China ballooned to over $70 billion, rising further to $100 billion in 2023-2024. And now if you see, China happens to be India's largest trading partner. So this is also one of the reasons why while on one side there is economic expansion, but if you see the contribution or the growth of the manufacturing sector is very minuscule. Next one, if you see, there is this is the term, that is fixed investment rate. Before that, we need to understand what are the terms like the gross fixed capital formation as well as the net fixed capital formation. The gross fixed capital formation is nothing but the total value of the country's newly acquired fixed assets. It can be either buildings, it can be machineries or other kind of equipments in an economy that adds value to your country year on year. Whereas if you see net fixed capital formation, here it is the gross fixed capital formation minus the depreciation. For example, if we acquire an equipment or a machinery, that is actually subjected to wear and tear, right? So its value depreciates. So that is called as a net fixed capital formation. So now let us read the fixed investment rate. Here they are saying the aggregate fixed investment rate or the gross fixed capital formation has hovered around 30% of the GDP. Yes, this is understood. However, if you see, it has grown by 30% or it has been hovering around 30%. However, this is actually not contributed by the manufacturing sector. Whereas you can see that there is acquisition of more machinery, more equipment and more buildings just for the purpose of the services sector when compared to that of the manufacturing sector. Especially you can see a hike in the telecom as well as infrastructure, whereas the share of the manufacturing investment stagnated to around 18%. So this actually indicates a lack of growth in the manufacturing investment, which is crucial for the capacity expansion and the technological advancement. And only when this increases, this can actually lead to the creation of jobs in the economy and so on. Okay. So moving forward, the next one is impact of COVID-19. How this has actually affected the manufacturing sector. The COVID-19 pandemic significantly impacted the net fixed capital formation. Of course, that time acquisition of these buildings and other things were less, contributing to high negative growth figures, and even excluding the pandemic. Before that, if you see in the 2019-20, it was around minus 1.6 only. So this continued negative growth indicates a persistent lack of expansion in the manufacturing capacity, and this further aggravates or exacerbating supply-demand imbalances that we still face. Now moving forward, this is the last part where the author has actually recommended few policy regulations and recommendations in order to revitalize the manufacturing sector. Okay, the first one, he says that there has to be a well-designed industrial policy, and that actually has to be based on productive investment rather than speculative property development. The next one, you must actually have the trade as well as the industrial policies, hand in hand. That is, trade which includes the imports and the exports should actually go with the existing industrial policies, and it should not work in silos. Next, they say that there should not be an umbrella or a standardized regulation for even the small industries, because they actually have to be given localized and context-specific interventions so that they can perform well in promoting productive employment and drive sustainable growth at the same time. And finally, this includes addressing regulatory bottlenecks and also improving infrastructure and fostering innovation. So this is a topic where we had actually understood what basically encompasses encompasses the sectors of the economy like the primary, secondary as well as the tertiary. In the secondary, we had discussed about what manufacturing is all about and what is the current state of stagnation it is actually facing, why it is facing, and what are the policy recommendations that are suggested in order to revitalize the same. So I hope you enjoyed this live session. So here we have actually come to the end of the session. So for more regular updates and more such live sessions, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you.